And if you've never done this, I think the brother over here might have something to say about this, but the mixture, one of the most attended church in the United States, a church down in Houston, they have fantastic worship, and in the middle of the worship, before the sermon, they ask anybody in the church who's carrying a heavy burden if they would like to come and receive prayer. They have 20 or 30 people standing down in front. The worship continues, the prayer, the consolation, the comfort. It's a beautiful, moving time, and then they close that out, and then the sermon starts. But try it. Mix ministry with worship. We even do our baptisms this way. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but we have 30 or 40 minutes of beautiful worship, everybody singing, and while people are singing, the people who are going to be baptized come up on stage, and they're baptized while people are singing beautiful worship songs to God, and people cheer, and then they keep singing, and people keep getting baptized. It's very powerful. Okay, you've already heard me talk about this. Everyone wants to know, is God still changing lives? Can anybody tell a true story of how God's working? And boy, when you hear a true story of how God's working, it's a very, very powerful thing. You want to hear a creative idea on this? Okay. We're just about ready to do this, and I thought we were the first ones in the world who were going to do it. And then I met someone, and I think he's actually the first one. I just met him this week. So I've been telling our production people, our technical people, to build what looks like a phone booth in our lobby and have it set up with a little camera and a microphone that you can just push a green button, and you look at the camera and you speak into the microphone and you say, my name is Bill Hybels, and I've been a Christian since I was whatever. My email is such and such. My phone number is such and such. I want to tell you how God touched my life recently. Then they tell the whole story. They push the red button and they leave. And you encourage everyone in your congregation who God has touched in some way to go into the God touched me booth. Okay? And then maybe once a week or every other week, you have someone who watches all of those testimonies, all of those stories, and then you choose one or you choose two, and you say, the whole church needs to hear about this. And I've been telling our people that we're going to build such a booth, and then I was with a pastor recently, and he said, we already built a booth. I said, oh, I wanted to be the first one. But I'm traveling with my associate, Gary Schwamlein. And so Gary used to be a executive with a multinational corporation, very powerful, very wealthy man, left that to come to work at our church and to help churches internationally. Last week, his 5-year-old granddaughter died. It was horrible. In every way you can think of a situation being horrible, it was horrible, okay? And the funeral was a couple hours away from Willow, and Gary's like a brother to me, so I flew down to where he buried his 5-year-old granddaughter. And terribly sad situation, but Gary stood up and he talked about hope. Hope. And while he was giving that talk, I thought, I want Gary to stand up a few months from now, not while it's still so fresh, but a few months from now, I want him to stand up in front of our church and say, 3 months ago, I buried my granddaughter. And it was horrible. She had a brain tumor and died. But I want you to know, I didn't leave God. It didn't wreck my faith. In many ways, it made my faith stronger. Every person who's far from God, who wonders if Christianity is real, Those are the kinds of stories they want to hear. Not, I became a Christian and then I got a bonus and then I got, made president. That's not believable. Let's not associate that kind of prosperity junk with the core of our faith. What people want to know is, does God love me? Is God with me? Will he take me through the hard times? Can he be trusted when it's all going wrong? That's what they want to know. Now, how often do you have people, normal people, not pastors? Pastors are not normal. They started out normal, and along the way, they became abnormal. So pastor stories don't count anymore. But how are you capturing the stories of normal people in your church and then sort of qualifying those and then saying at a very beautiful time in your service, maybe between two worship songs, you're worshiping and all that, you let someone continue to play the piano underneath and you say, here's my friend. He went through a rough patch and God was faithful to him. The person comes up and talks for 2 minutes. Then you go right back into a worship song. Church services matter. They matter enormously. And they should be prayed over and planned. And just, I'm a fairly busy person, but the people who plan our services, I spend 2 hours with them every Wednesday from 12 o'clock till 2 o'clock. And we say, what are we going to, how can we imagine someone encountering God this week? And if I'm preaching, I say, well, I'm having a problem with my sermon. It's not probably going to be through the sermon this week that they're going to have a big encounter with God. So we better figure out how else they can have some very strong encounter with God, because I don't know that it's possible through my part of the service. And they say, well, so-and-so just wrote a song. Maybe he could explain how that song came to him and it'll come through music. Or maybe we could have a special ministry time or prayer time. Maybe we could have a couple people tell their stories or something, right? Okay, I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes, and what I want to do is I want to open this up for any questions, comments, contrary thoughts, things that we missed on this where you go, why are you didn't even talk about this or that or this or that, okay? This is your time for interaction, whatever you want to say about it. Yes, go ahead. You first. How have I learned how to preach fantastic sermons? All right, well, let's talk about great preaching, okay? Is that okay? Can we talk about great preaching? Okay. So you say, let's define what great preaching is. Is great preaching necessarily great oratory? No, that helps, but I mean, you can have great oratorical skills and preach a horrible sermon, correct? So you're looking for more than oratory. You can have great content and still have a horrible sermon. I mean, you could have perfect content and preach a horrible sermon. Yes? Okay. So this is a complicated thing we're talking about. So here's what I teach my young communicators. I'll just go kind of down a list here first. I'll say, okay, first of all, you have to walk with God and be in solitude and search the Scriptures until He burns in you a word that our congregation needs to hear. There's a big difference saying, I'm going to teach through Ephesians 2. You go, okay, I've taught through Ephesians many times. But if I'm going to teach through Ephesians 2, I have to live in Ephesians 2 long enough until there's a fire that starts in my heart about some truth in Ephesians 2. I don't care if that takes me 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours. I can't come to the pulpit unless a fire has started in me where I think the greatest text in the world is contained in Ephesians chapter 2. It starts with a fire in you. And you have to be with God until He starts the fire. You can't manufacture fire. That's cheating. People can tell if you're just yelling louder, you know. This last week, I had to teach out of Proverbs 11:14. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there are many counselors, in the presence of many counselors, there is much wisdom. Yes? Do you all know this passage? In the abundance of counselors, there is much wisdom. So I said to the congregation, I said, I feel very strongly about this passage. That's how I started out. I feel very strongly about this passage. And they're like, I wonder why he feels so strongly about this passage. And I go, because some of my counselors have helped me make the best decisions I ever made in my life. And there's another side to this passage that I feel very strongly about. Even though some of my counselors have told me to go in a particular direction, sometimes all my counselors were wrong, and had I listened to them, I would have missed the greatest adventures of my life. People are like, well, that's confusing. And I'm like, well, that's why we have 40 minutes to sort this out. So what I did is I started building the case. I said, just because you have counselors, that doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of making the decision. You have to discern the advice of your advisors. Right? Group of people tell you something, you're like, thank you very much. Am I going to go blindly do it? No. So I had this phrase. I worked on it for a long time. When someone gives me counsel, I weigh it. I don't blindly obey it. I weigh it. I don't blindly obey it. And I talked to them very personally and very passionately about the fact that when God wanted me to start Willow Creek, when I was 22, the first 5 people who were spiritually mature and older and wiser and pastors and so, I went to them and I said, God has put it on my heart to start this new church. What do you think? 5 out of 5 said it was a terrible idea. I was too young, didn't have a seminary degree, too inexperienced, it was undercapitalized, it would never work. I said if I would have listened to their counsel, there would be no Willow. I would probably still be in the marketplace, which is not a bad thing, but I would have missed the adventure of my life. I weighed their counsel. I didn't obey it. And then I turned and I said to people, there are things that God's talking to you about right now. He wants you to step up. He wants you to step out and do something. And your friends are saying it's too costly. You're too young. It'll require too much sacrifice. Make you whiter than snow, and then he wants to pick you up and use you. Great preaching lifts the human spirit. Great preaching makes you feel, I can make a difference. Just puny little me, I can make a difference. Now let's get real practical about great preaching. How do you become a better preacher? It's very simple. How you become a better preaching. You listen more to great preachers. With the internet, if you decided to go home at noon today, you could spend from noon until midnight listening to the finest communicators in the world for free.